is it the other way around?
Exactly.
That's
Exactly.
such a fascinating question. So where are we as far as science is concerned with this specific question? It's a fascinating question. What's the starting
Yeah.
factor? Where does it all begin?
Yeah, I think a lot of the trauma research focuses on the first 18 years of life because there are differences between people that have trauma in developmental processes versus people that have trauma in their 20s, 30s, 40s, et cetera. Now, of course, people that have a lot of early life trauma are more susceptible to later life trauma. But the biggest body of research is on adverse childhood experiences, which are, multiple forms of adversity experienced either in the household or in the community. The traditional ACE measure just looked at childhood maltreatment and household dysfunction among the parents, but now we're looking at adversity that can happen in the schools, in the community, et cetera. So the most research is on the first 18 years of life and how that can actually change someone's biology. There was a lot of research showing that ACEs, adverse childhood experiences, increase the risk for drug addiction and alcohol. The risk is sometimes fourfold, fivefold, triple, quadruple the likelihood of having an addiction to an illicit substance following childhood adversity. And then from there, it was like, okay, what are the mechanisms? What are the actual biological mechanisms? How does trauma impact the brain? How does it affect the immune system? Increase inflammation? How does that affect the brain? The HPA axis? There's a lot of potential epigenetic changes. So there's about 7 pathways linking trauma to addictions, trauma early in life. And if you look at similarities between substance use disorders and ultra-processed food addiction, you can sort of just map it right on and say, if this increases the risk for addictions, why wouldn't it increase for other addictions as well? So yeah, there are studies on early life trauma and ultra-processed food addiction, but we definitely need more. I've actually been collecting data in my practice now for about 2 years, and I'm getting ready to analyze it, looking at ACEs and food addiction. And I really want to adjust for dieting behavior and eating disorder behavior, because the argument against food addiction is that a lot of people have these symptoms because they've been dieting too hard and they have disordered eating, body dissatisfaction. So what we're trying to do now is tease out the association between trauma and food addiction, tease out the contribution from body image and dieting that comes from the more classic eating disorder psychopathology.
I want to go back. Earlier on, you mentioned adverse childhood experiences known as ACEs. Can you give us some examples of what sorts of adverse reaction, is it experiences or reaction experiences we're talking about, childhood ACEs? What could they be? Because we're talking about the mini or a micro traumas. We're not talking about one major event in a child's life, but we're talking about a series of minor traumas that add up to adverse childhood experience, right?
So the most well-known ones fall under the category of childhood maltreatment, which would include childhood sexual abuse, physical abuse, and then of course there's like psychological abuse, right? And then, there's multiple forms of neglect. It could be emotional neglect, not giving the child attention and love. And it could be physical neglect, not providing clean clothes, food, and consistency, right? If a baby grows up without consistent patterns of safety, right, that can be a very serious problem that can be imprinted in their biology and have major prediction for mental health issues and physical health issues later on in life. And then there's a category of what we call household dysfunction, which looks at the environment in the home growing up. So for example, if a family member is using drugs or alcohol, if there is domestic violence in the home, if there is someone who is mentally ill, if someone goes to prison or goes to jail, if there is parental separation or divorce, right? So those are the sort of two main categories of adverse childhood experiences in the household, is childhood maltreatment and then household dysfunction. And then, as I mentioned earlier, they've expanded the concept of adverse childhood experiences to go beyond the household and just start looking at adversity in the community. So for example, there could be children that grow up in really good households where there isn't any abuse or neglect. The parents are happily married, but there is a lot of adversity in the school or in the community coming home from school. So this is what we call community level ACEs, which occur outside of the home. And this includes bullying, exposure to violence, discrimination, particularly based on, race or ethnicity, gender, sexual orientation, etc. And yeah, someone could have a lot of adversity in the community and none at home, but there's also cases where children have a lot of adversity at home, but tend to have a lot of support in the community. Maybe they have other relatives that take care of them because their parents aren't doing so great. Maybe they built a social network and they really love being at school. And so sometimes it's difficult in research to tease out, what's the more, contributing ACE, because they tend to cluster and co-occur. People that have one ACE tend to have multiple ACEs. So the research really says it's not usually the single ACE that predicts a health outcome, but usually when there's an accumulation of multiple ACEs present, that people have high predictability for disordered eating. That's my area of interest. We did a systematic review to show those that had multiple ACEs had a 46% increase in quote unquote obesity in adulthood. So, that could be a food addiction process. It could be a lot of other things as well. But the original ACE study from 1998 has been cited now over 10,000 times. It's like one of the most cited papers in one of them, top something. I don't know how high up there, but it's one of the most cited papers in history.